Okay, I see that the music and the rhythm is slowly fading away. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Dr. Valencia Walker. I'm a neonatologist, and I have the amazing privilege of serving as the moderator for tonight's session. We are really, really happy that you joined us. Um, because what we're here to talk about tonight is something that probably doesn't come up at Thanksgiving dinner, depending on who you are and where you are. But nonetheless, this is a topic that we think is really important for you to be empowered, to know and understand where to go for something that we refer to as liquid gold. And I'm talking about human milk and lactation and feeding your baby, particularly if you're the parent of a preemie. And so tonight's session is feeding your preemie, navigating human milk, and nutritional needs. And when we go through this session tonight, what we really want you to get a better understanding of is, how do I feed my baby? How do I pump? Because I can tell you as a neonatologist, tiny little babies, this is the only time in your life where eating is exercise. Babies actually burn calories trying to eat. If only that worked for me and red velvet cake. But nonetheless, we're going to talk about that transition to pumping and then having your baby feed directly with you, how to store that liquid gold, why it's important to do fortification, and what we're trying to accomplish. And then other things that I'm excited to learn about is what happens after you go home. And so we are going to start off with a presentation from two amazing speakers that are going to bring to you a very real perspective and are also going to demonstrate to you the power of sisterhood and community. Because the other thing we have to remember is that doing this, feeding your baby, it's not just you. It really does take a village and understanding where all those different resources can be. So we'll start off with a presentation. After that, we have some questions that have come in advance that we'll highlight, and then we'll leave time for some of your questions as well. But you can always use the Q&A function to ask questions as you hear things come up throughout the event. So let me start with giving you a brief introduction of our two speakers tonight. First, we have Christina Hughes. She is a licensed practical nurse. She is a certified birth doula, a lactation educator, and an advocate for human milk feeding. And she's based in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She has over almost a decade working as a nurse, and she's deeply committed to reproductive justice, and we appreciate her for her work. She's had many lives, and she brings all of her lived experiences into this space, including her time as a registered EMT. One of the things we're excited about, again, it's a community. So our organization is happy to hear her talk about her work co-founding Diamonds for Doulas and how she works with Birthing by Your Design. Like so many other places, Alabama is facing a crisis when it comes to pregnancy-related mortality. And she just does so much across different organizations to really support lactation and birth services so that you're supported every step of your journey. In addition to Christina, we'll hear from Jamila Channel. And Jamila herself is the founder of Naima's Love. She is an amazing healthcare professional and really about advocating for support of families all the way from pregnancy into the post-pregnancy, postpartum experience. She is also a certified doula, a lactation advocate, a midwife assistant, and what's really cool, nothing for us without us. She is the lead family research navigator for the Healthy Brain and Child Development Study at the University of Alabama. She's also chief of operations for Diamonds for Doulas. Now, the one thing I'm going to say, And I said I wasn't going to give her too much of a hard time because we're going to do HBCU love. She is a proud Bethune-Cookman University psychology graduate. Her and her husband Andre have two children, Ashe and Naima. I am a Florida A&M University graduate, but again, in this space, it is all HBCU love. Before we get started with the presentations, Christina and Jamila, do you want to talk a little bit about Diamonds for Doulas? And while you do that, I'm going to put some information in the chat for people who may not know what a doula is, and some of the things that doulas do.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for having us. We are grateful to be here this evening. Jamila and myself, we both have co-founded Diamonds for Doulas. We do a lot of work in the community. We offer um, breastfeeding support group, pregnancy infant loss support group, postpartum support group. We host a annual community baby shower in Tuscaloosa, an annual community baby shower in Jamila's hometown of Orlando. Both of those baby showers centered around giving families everything they would need to start their journey as parents, feel comfortable in the role as being a parent, information for safe sleep, infant CPR, breastfeeding support. I'm trying to think. We give many supplies, car seats, bassinets, baby tubs, Pampers, wipes, things to bathe your baby with, all things baby. And I'm going to pass it to Jamila for her to add anything she would like to add about our wonderful work that we do in our communities.
Yes, we're also able to give scholarships so that moms can have free doula support during their labor and delivery, and working with them to prepare for labor and delivery. But we also are so excited that we are now able to provide postpartum support for our community through scholarships. So we are really excited about adding that service on to our organization. We want to make sure that we are well-rounded and we're really there for our community to make sure that moms know that you have a support system here through Diamonds for Doula. So we serve West Alabama, and we're located in Tuscaloosa, and we just enjoy what we do, and that's why we keep going. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get started with that first presentation because I don't want us to run out of time because I know people are going to have questions they want to ask.
Yes, let's jump right into it. So, we are going to talk about providing breast milk for premature babies. Providing breast milk for premature or seriously ill newborns may be a challenge, but is usually possible and well worth it. Breastfeeding is an effective way to enhance your baby's health, growth, and development. And we know that when you have more support around you from your family, from a lactation specialist, from a nurse, that you are able to really reach those breastfeeding goals, even though you have a premature newborn. And oh wait, can you go back? I'm sorry. I want to acknowledge our sweet baby that's on there. That's my daughter in the background. Sorry. So that is Christina's baby, Taylor, in the when she was in the NICU. And that little lady right there is a diva now. She is mighty and strong and she does not hold back. So we have living proof that what breast milk and making it through the NICU can do. So we're really proud of our baby Taylor. Okay, next slide. How premature breast milk meets your baby's special needs. Mothers of premature babies produce breast milk that is slightly different in composition. Um, at least in the first couple of weeks, this difference is designed to meet your baby's particular needs. And the way that it's different is that it is higher in protein and minerals, such as salt, and contains a different type of fat that makes it easier for the babies to digest. The fat in the human breast milk helps to enhance the development of the baby's brain and neurologic tissues, which is especially important for premature babies. Human milk is easier for them to digest than the formula, which has the cow's milk protein. which is a little bit more difficult for premature babies to digest. So it's pretty cool that the body is able to meet the needs of your premature baby, just by changing the composition of the breast milk and making sure that it is higher in fat so that the baby can develop a little quicker. Next slide. So, breastfeeding a newborn versus formula feeding a newborn. Premature babies who are breastfed are less likely to develop intestinal infections than are babies who are formula fed. Even if your baby is not able to like latch on to your breast or latch on to an actual bottle, it's still really good for you to pump your milk and save it by freezing it. So when baby is able to actually accept that milk that is available for them. Formula feeding can potentially expose a premature baby's immature intestinal lining to the cow's protein that are found in the baby's formula. So it could be a little bit harsher for them to digest, and it can lead to some infections. To ensure adequate growth and strong bones, neonatologists may enrich the diet of a tiny premature baby by adding special supplement nutrients to the mother's breast milk. Often, this is in the form of commercially available milk fortifiers. Occasionally, they may determine an infant with a lower birth weight needs a special baby formula for premature babies, sometimes altering the formula with your breast milk. So, these are different ways that babies are still able to be fed and to still be able to get that breast milk, even though they are considered premature. Next slide.
Okay, breastfeeding support while you're in NICU with your little one. Your first step would be to enlist the support of professionals. My advice is starting off with any pregnancy, you would want to get your support team together. Doula, whatever healthcare provider you decide to go with, whether it's a midwife or OBGYN, any extra support people in your family or friends that you want to pinpoint to be your support while you are starting your pregnancy off. Nobody starts a pregnancy off knowing that they're going to have a premature baby. So definitely composing your support team is very important. Many hospitals do offer areas for nursing, and they also offer specialists to assist mothers with breastfeeding. These experienced members of your support team can show you how to assemble and use the electrical pump. They can teach you how to hand express. They can teach you how to use the manual pump, and they can give you the guidelines for milk storage. I do want to just say that for moms who are having a NICU stay, I would really suggest that you reach out to the specialists that are there, the lactation specialists, to continue your journey. Many hospitals will give you a snack bag if you are pumping. They will also give you a extra tray if you are having to stay. Like I had to stay weeks past when I was discharged, so I was able to get an extra tray. I was able to get a snack. I did not know to ask for a lactation specialist, so I do really suggest that moms that are having a NICU stay ask for a specialist. They will be able to help you as far as knowing your nutritional needs and other things, that just the small components that go into breastfeeding. It adds that extra layer of support. You do want to let your your baby's premature pediatrician know, and a neonatologist, while you're during that stay, that you are very adamant and very passionate about breastfeeding, so that they can form behind you to support you. um, your doctor can arrange for you to express the milk and feed your baby. Oftentimes, NICU babies, preemies will have a tube that's down there, a NG tube that's down their nose that goes down their throat. My daughter had one, and that is how we got her to feed. During this time, you will be able to either use like a small syringe or a small cup to have them feed. When they're really preemie, they don't suggest that you latch, just because they burn a lot of calories while feeding. So that small syringe and that small cup will be your friend during that time, especially when you're starting off in your NICU stay. Next slide, please. Your milk supply during this time, if your newborn is too small, like I said, they will have an NG tube placed, and you will be offered a hospital grade electric pump. Again, enlist the help of the lactation specialist at that hospital to help you know how to use the pump. The pump has many different speeds, many different settings that you can use. They can assist you in knowing what setting will help you best. Your hospital will also well, some hospitals let you take a pump home, the hospital grade pump, just so that you'll have a better chance of continuing to have an adequate milk supply. Maintaining your milk supply for mothers of preemies, the minimum amount of time to try to pump throughout a 24-hour period is at least 100 minutes. You should pump at regular intervals, probably an hour and a half to every 2 hours. Most people can keep up with that better. Um, Try not to go past 4 or 5 hours of pumping, and also try not to skip those night pumps. When you do night feedings and night pumps, the hormone that stimulates milk production, it goes into overdrive, so to say, in those early morning hours and late hours of the night. So try not to skip those night pumps. um, Massage your breast before and during the use of the pump to improve the milk flow and even boost your milk supply. A lot of places they will have rooms where you can go pump, but also rooms where you can talk about nutrition while you are pumping. And also, like the hospital, when I was there with my daughter, they had a volunteer room. The volunteers would bring lactation cookies, they would bring us extra water, just all of those things to help us along our journey with breastfeeding. Next slide, please. Feeding your premature baby in the hospital, your breast milk can be fed through a tube that passes through their nose or into their through their nose and mouth into their stomach. Like I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to use a syringe or a tiny cup or a small bottle. um, Early breastfeeding sessions will probably be more successful when your baby is awake and alert. Sometimes preemie babies, they will tire easily, so a good way whenever you're trying to feed is to kind of just kind of get them as uncomfortable as possible, unswaddle them, kind of get them alert as possible. That'll help your feeding session go a lot smoother. Like I said earlier, they do tire easily. So those sessions will be kind of brief. Don't get discouraged. As time go on, you'll have more and more time to get your feeding sessions down packed, but also each time your baby will get better at feeding. Bonding with your preemie baby, you would want to encourage rooming in. I know a lot of times in NICUs, they have rooms where it's several preemie babies in the room. Starting off with my daughter, we started off in a room with three. So I did not have a lot of privacy initially. She did move to a private room where I was able to room in with her, but increasing number of hospitals allow moms to room in and stay overnight if you have a private room. uh, this can help you start to learn your infant's round the clock hunger cues and their breastfeeding rhythm. This experience can ease the transition from hospital to home, just because you will be more familiar with your baby feeding cues and knowing when they're ready to feed. You'll also have time to do skin to skin or kangaroo care. Rooming in enables you to have more skin to skin time, especially if you have a private room. This is shown to be beneficial to stabilize and optimize their growth and development. Breast milk and pumping or expression immediately after holding your baby skin to skin is one of the most effective ways to increase your milk supply. Those um, brain signals and hormone releases of you doing the skin to skin and seeing your baby will help your milk supply increase, and it's very helpful while bedside in the NICU. Next slide, please. And it's time for questions and answers.
Absolutely. Thanks for going through that kind of like introduction to ground everyone. I was trying to capture a few notes because I know sometimes people join us as we're talking. So I put in some references for what doulas are and just some of the things that you referenced. I want to go back to something that I have found as a neonatologist is really important, and you touched on it, but just how involved you need to be with your baby's care. I know a lot of people like, oh my God, my baby's so tiny, my baby's so sick. The doctors and the nurses know everything. But when you are there and you're doing like that skin to skin that we call kangaroo care, that can help with your milk supply, that can help with your baby's actual growth and development. So, my question to start off with, can you tell me about your experience navigating kangaroo care and ways that parents can advocate for that? Because I know sometimes if you don't ask, they won't do it.
Absolutely. I was very adamant. This is actually before I became a doula, but I just had done some research, and I'm a nurse, so I knew a little bit about the birthing space and skin to skin and all of those things. So I was very adamant, but starting off we could only do like 10 minutes because she was in the incubator. So but every time they would let me do 10 minutes, I would do 10 minutes, and then I advocated for my husband to get 3 minutes of skin to skin so that he could do some bonding with her as well. I would say for parents that are navigating a NICU stay, it's important if you have the means to stay with your child to room in. I did room in the entire time she was there, and I actually ended up having to advocate for them to take the NG tube out. I noticed during our stay they would give her feeding with the on the timer with the NG tube, but I would notice about 45 minutes to an hour later, she would start showing me hunger cues. And so I spoke it over with the nurse, and she said, "Oh, I really don't think the natologist will take it out." I said, "Well, I'll talk to him when he comes." So I told him, I said, I think she wants to have something in her mouth opposed to the feeding. And I said, and it's something in her nose going down her throat. Nobody would really want to feed with all of that going on. So he told me, he said, "Well, you're here around the clock, so I feel comfortable taking it out." He told me the volume that he wanted her to have within a 24-hour period. We met that volume. I wrote it down. We did her weight, we did all of that. And then he said that if she could eat that volume in another 24 hours, we could go home. So essentially, that's how we were able to go home, is that I was there. We I was looking at her cues, learning as much as I could about her. And then I just advocated for her in the way that I thought that I should, outside of being a medical professional, just as being a mom and being there and just bonding with my baby.
So, for people who may not know, right? Because first of all, I love that story because it does talk to that power of you can still be mom and you can still understand all this jargon, like this is the volume you have to take, and things like that. So you can be like, look, I know my baby's feeding cues. This is what my baby's doing, and this is what I think. And you're right, not everyone has the means to be there all the time, but I think it's easier to advocate when you know your baby, right? But you kind of brought up another term just now that I was thinking people may not be as familiar with, but it just escaped me. So I feel like Jamila was going to jump in. So I'm going to let her jump in and then I'll think about where that word went.
No, I am yes, Naima. I am just always like so I was listening to Christina tell her story about how she was advocating for her baby in the NICU, and she's still it's so nice to see how she still does that for her daughter now. Um, Advocating, making sure that she gets everything that she needs, and really speaking up for her baby. So I was just kind of admiring her motherhood, in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it can be like really daunting when you're like, I want to advocate, but then you're still able to do it in that space in that way. So, like I said, we did get quite a few really good questions. Some of the things you did touch on in your presentation, um, but I want to go maybe to a few questions that I've seen here that maybe I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more on. Being stressed out, not sleeping well, being worried about your baby, we know all those things can have an impact on how much milk you produce. So, what advice do you have for someone who's struggling to produce enough milk? What are some ideas, some tips, some strategies for them to use?
I'll jump in. Oh, okay. So just in general, when it comes to breastfeeding and feeling overwhelmed and stressed out, of course, you just had a new baby, you're healing, and all of those things are going along. And then you also have a baby in the NICU, which can be even more overwhelming, and you're trying to get there and be with your baby. But I think taking the time to kind of like just write out what are your needs and seeing how you can get
Mm,
help. How can you delegate for someone else to step in and help you in those moments to kind of alleviate some of that stress. I think that'd be beneficial, and just letting your community know that, hey, I'm really trying to focus on breastfeeding and I'm a bit overwhelmed. How can you help assist me in other ways so I can focus on producing more breast milk? Also, talking to a lactation specialist is good. Even having like a peer support, somebody who has already been through the process of breastfeeding, somebody who has been in the process of breastfeeding a NICU baby, just so you can feel like, okay, you can understand what's normal and what's not. I think that is the biggest misconception when it comes to like production of milk production. Like everybody has a different amount that they produce, but it is hard
yes.
to understand what is the actual norm and what my baby
Mhm.
actually needs. So I think really taking the time to understand those things can alleviate a lot of the stress and frustration when it comes to milk production.
So, Jamila, we're going to come back to that differences in production because that is going to lead into the question I was going to ask Christina, or actually ask both of you. Christina, you mentioned knowing the hunger cues. Okay, my cues when I'm hungry might look a little different than, let's say, a premature baby. So, what were some of the hunger cues that you learned to watch out for or notice when your baby was in the NICU?
I noticed that she would put her hands to her mouth and she would salivate so bad. Like you would think she had not just had a feeding 30 minutes ago. She would move her head. And that's what breastfed babies do, like when they want to latch. So I knew, and I'm pretty sure she did some more, but I know those are the two that stuck out to me. Those are the two that made me leave out of the room, go get the nurse, and say, "Hey,
My baby's hungry.
these hunger cues." And she said, yes. She said, yes, matter of fact, it is. But she just had a feeding like 30 minutes ago. And so I said, well, maybe she actually wants to try like a bottle. I wasn't successful with latching, but I didn't really know to ask for a lactation specialist.
Mhm.
In my mind, I was discharged, so I didn't know I had that extra support. I do want to go back to what Jamila said about about moms having um different amounts of breast milk. I
Mhm.
did go through a period. We had a 3 week stay. I want to say about that second week, I started noticing that I wasn't producing as much, and so we kind of went back and forth about me wanting milk from the milk bank. It was actually like this big thing that I really had to advocate for. And I think I had like a day of milk that I had pumped prior to. And I just flat out told the doctor, I was like, at this point, if I can't get and this might not have been like politically correct, but I told myself, if you can't connect me with a milk bank, I have a cousin that's still breastfeeding, I will get breast milk. I was so adamant about her having breast milk, especially during that time. My daughter was also, she also had jaundice, which is like the yellowish tint to the eyes and the skin. And so I knew breast milk would help with her with the jaundice to alleviate that issue that she had as well. So I do want to just really, really tell people to advocate. If breast milk is what you want your preemie to have, you do not have to take know for an answer. It's many other ways that you can get breast milk. It's community sharing if they would allow you to, or they know they have access to milk banks. They can get you breast milk if you advocate enough for them to get it for you.
So I can tell you as a neonatologist in the NICU, and I made the comment, we think of human milk as liquid gold because it's so valuable. Um, but there is a difference between colostrum and your milk. And colostrum, I want to talk about that for a second, and then we're going to go back to that idea of difference in supply. Colostrum sometimes is just a few drops. And a lot of times people be like, oh, I only got a few drops. I don't want to give that to you. I was like, oh no. Colostrum is like 5-hour energy. It packs a punch in small amounts. So even those few drops are fantastic. And I think a lot of times people feel like I don't have enough milk to give my baby all the milk my baby needs. But every little bit you give your baby is helpful. And sometimes we get so caught up with, I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough, it's not enough, that we make things harder and worse. And when we compare ourselves to other people, it can also be challenging. Some people just make a whole lot of milk, but part of the reason why they make a whole lot of milk is that their milk is not the same calorie amount. And often people who make less milk, when you test that milk, it has higher calories, so you're getting more bang for your buck. So I know both of you said you want to talk about that difference in how people produce milk. So I want to let you all also talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so I'll just talk about my experience with breastfeeding. I breastfed both of my babies until they were 18 months old. So it was literally like a span of 3 years for both of them. And I would pump, I mean, I like they would latch on. So they were always latching on. And when I needed to go to like have them go to a babysitter or with a family member or something, I would pump some milk to be able to give it to them. But my son was like maybe like 7, 8 months old or something like that. But he would literally not drink more than like 2.5 ounces out of the bottle. But I know like when you latch your baby onto your breast, you can get the baby is able to get a little bit more milk out compared to what you actually pump or what you give in the bottle. So I think a lot of people were like, well, you're not giving him enough. You're not giving him enough milk or whatever. And he was nice, fat, chunky, and meeting all of his milestones. So we knew that he was good.
Hmm.
And I think like for me, I was so glad that I understood like, okay, my milk production is different because I am literally just following their cues because I'm with them all the time and I just latch them onto my breast. I'm not like actually pumping or have my body on a schedule of when to produce the milk and like actually storing it up and things of that sort. So I really didn't know how much I actually like produce on a regular basis. I just knew that my babies were satisfied. They were having wet and dirty diapers, and they were gaining weight. So I try to tell people when they're actually like breastfeeding, it's very individualistic. Yes, Naima. Okay. It's very individualistic and it really has to meet your needs and your family needs. So what works best for you all? So if you are, a working mom and you have to pump milk and you have to keep your body on a schedule, you might produce way more milk than a mom who is just home exclusively latching her baby onto the breast. And that shouldn't discourage you from your breastfeeding journey. I always encourage them to follow, is your baby gaining weight? Is your baby having wet and dirty diapers? Does your baby seem to calm down after a feeding? Do they seem to like rest for maybe an hour or so after a feeding? And those are ways to encourage yourself about, oh, my breastfeeding journey is going good, not by how much milk you have in a bag or how much milk you have in a bottle.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to see those fat, chunky thighs and those fat, chunky cheeks. But you're right. Good wet diapers, good poopy diapers, gaining weight. And remember, babies gain weight pretty rapidly in the first year of life. And so when you see those things, it becomes less about an absolute number. Now, sometimes though, babies may struggle, right? With latching on. And I really appreciate what you said that it's about feeding your baby, um, not about trying to hit a goal. And if you recognize that latching on is difficult, there is nothing wrong with putting that milk in a bottle and feeding it to your baby. You might get a little more sleep at night because somebody else can take that night feeding with the baby. Um, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and I want to go back to ways that people can support you because it's hard to do it all. You're trying to feed, you got to clean and sterilize, you got to change the diaper. So, what are some strategies for how other people can help you be successful with your journey to feed your baby?
I think I'm the queen of delegation. I always tell my postpartum moms when they get home, all of the flow of people that want to come over and visit, delegate a task. You're coming to visit early afternoon. I would really like you to wash bottles, sanitize bottles. You're coming a little later in the evening. I would really like you to watch the baby while I take a nap. You're coming earlier in the morning. I really need laundry done. I really think it's the perfect time to delegate. Go through your needs. We've just rolled out a postpartum plan. I mean, a postpartum program. So within that program, we are all going through our postpartum plans and going over those things. And the postpartum plan is very important because it brings up things that you typically don't think about that need to be handled while you're in the postpartum period. But I did want to go back right quick to Jamila when she was talking about supply and pump and latching. And I do just want to remind people to, if you are pumping and latching, to not compare what you think you're giving your baby with latching to what you are pumping. Pumping doesn't do not equate to what your baby gets when they latch. When they latch onto your breast, they actually latch on to and when they pull, they have a stronger pull than any pump. They can try to mimic pumps in all the time, but they cannot mimic your baby latching onto. Your baby's suck is a lot stronger than a pump, so they will pull a lot more than what a pump pulls. So that's just, to me, I know some people like to pump so that they can kind of visualize what they're giving their baby in comparison to when their baby latched, but there is no comparison. You cannot compare the two.
Now, I will say this. Now, this is the neonatologist talking. The former 24-weeker probably can't suck as, hard as, say, the industrial grade pump, right?
Well, no,
Because they're
I'm
still
speaking
gaining
in
weight.
terms of once they go home, but like
Yes.
in the hospital, they may struggle to latch, and that's the only thing you can do is go by pumping. Because I've been there where she would she was a 35 weeker, but she would start a bottle and completely get exhausted, and it would just be done, which was why we put the tube in the first place. But I'm just saying in general, like as they progress in their breastfeeding journey, a lot of people like to compare the both, and you really can't compare the both.
And you are absolutely right. And so that's why I wanted to bring out that point because that was another question we received. Like, what are some of the differences between being in the hospital and being at home? Your baby continues to mature and develop and get bigger and stronger. So that journey should become more positive because you're seeing and looking for all those cues and your baby gets practice and gets better and better at latching on. So I appreciate you bringing out that difference between what it was like being in the NICU versus what it's like once you go home and your baby's like, I got this. I like doing this. Because I think a lot of times when people are in the hospital, they can't imagine that it's ever going to be different, right? Because they may see how their baby's struggling or they themselves may be struggling. So I definitely appreciate you speaking to that. I think there was another question that we came in advance, and then I want us to open it up and maybe see what other questions people have for us. Um, One of the challenges that may come up is that you may do everything right, and it's still not enough for your baby, especially while your baby's hospitalized and we're trying to get your baby to grow. Do you all have any feedback or ideas around when we have to use fortification um, for babies to help them gain weight and grow?
My my client her baby just turned 1, but she was 25 weeks and 2 days. So she actually she turned 1 in August, but we know her adjusted age is 1 this month. She just came off fortifiers. I remember when they were having the conversation about her starting the fortifier with the human milk. She used the milk bank. um she was very hesitant at first, so it was a lot of educating and just getting the neonatologist to explain how the fortifier would help her little one to thrive, and then also just having the nurses along with myself just reinforce that education, but also help her get more comfortable with just feeding in general. She was then, when they brought up giving her the fortify, she was going from getting fed through the tube to the bottle. So it was a lot going on at one
A
time.
lot of changes.
Yeah, it was a lot of changes. So it just took a lot of support, but then also just peer support. I would just encourage her to go to the volunteer room and sit with some of the other moms, because when you sit with the other moms you realize we're all at a different point in our journey. And you know, if it's a mom that's this close to getting discharged and it's a brand new mom that just delivered, and you can all sit and you can talk about where you are in the journey, and then it could become more real. That, you know, it may look a little gray right now, but as
Mm,
time go on, things can get better, and that includes the feeding. You know, eventually they will get to a point where they will be healthy and stronger, and they won't need to fortify anymore.
right. Yeah, I tend to, when I talk about it, I try to remind people that we think of, because we use it that way, we think of it almost like a medication. This is something that you need right now, but this is not something that you're going to need forever. But if we use it right now and we get that growth, then to your point, when often once you get home, you're like, that's past me. Jamila, did you want to add anything to that part of the experience? Okay. Now, the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that, there's been a lot in the news about concerns with like using fortifiers and using different types of milk. Um, when you think about, or I should say, this was an experience I had as a clinician, and I'm going to talk about two different things. One, I was surprised at the number of people who were hesitant to use donor human milk. There was something that people felt was icky about using milk from somebody else that they didn't know. Um, but we also understand the benefit of human milk. So, have you experienced that, or where people have had those types of reservations, or how would you speak to that?
My client that I just spoke about initially, she started her journey pumping. She decided that she wanted to you get contraception, so it affected her milk supply. So
Mhm.
when we were going over donor milk with her, she was initially like, oh no, I don't want another, I don't want another woman's milk. I don't know what she's been doing. I don't know if her diet was good. So we did have to educate her. Most milk banks, they do screen the milk. You know, they have a questionnaire. They ask, you know, what type of diet they have. If they're a person that exercise, if they're a person moderate exercise, you know, um, and a list of other questions. But initially, she just did not want to. She didn't trust it. And I had to tell her too. It's a difference in community milk sharing in a milk bank. I'm not against either, but I think that if people have real reservations about receiving milk from another person, that the milk bank will be the best option, because we know that milk is screened and they've asked questions, and they can kind of like pair you with somebody that you see through the questionnaire that will better fit like yourself.
But it's also like taking the time to let them know or reassure them, like, that is a very human response to be like, I don't know how I feel about getting donor milk from someone else, because breast milk is still considered a bodily fluid. So it's still like, we're humans, and we're like told, oh, don't interact too much with other people's bodily fluid. So it's a natural response to be like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. But I think taking the time to validate, hey, you are right in your mindset, because that's how we have been conditioned in society. But let me go ahead and take the time to educate you and show you the benefits of using donor milk, and even share with you some stories of some moms who have used donor milk and how that was beneficial for their baby.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? Like we spent our whole life saying don't share germs, right? We don't swap s- snot, things like that. But I love the way that you talked about it because it is the way that we approach it, particularly with milk banks. We treat it just like we wouldn't just randomly just get blood from somebody off the street and give it to you. It has to go through a strict screening process, a sterilization process. And we do go over all those things with a consent form. We have labels to make sure you get what we say you're getting. Because it is important to take those precautions. But the fact that it is human milk, there's still that benefits even if it's not your milk. So first and foremost, I know where I practice, we use all of your milk first. Then if we need to supplement with donor milk, we can. And then often, just because of the calories that are needed, we do have to do the fortification, and there are different types of fortification. Because ideally, the point, that Christina made, you want your baby to grow big enough to where they're like, I got this, send me home. And being able to get those tubes out and be big and strong is ultimately the goal. So at this point, I want to make sure we have time to take questions. I don't know, Marie, if any questions have come in from the audience or have come in online. I don't see anything in our Q&A session. So I want to pause here and see if there are questions from our audience that's listening in. Okay. I don't want to rush through in case they need a little bit more time to think about it. Okay, so I don't think I see anything that's coming through for us. So, oh, here we go. Ooh, this is a really good question. See, you just gotta wait. The good stuff always shows up. Can you talk more about nipple shields and how to know when ready to wean off? And I'm gonna pause and say, before you talk about nipple shields, will you just talk about nipples? Because I don't think women understand not everybody's nipples are exactly the same.
Yes, of course. As individual beings that we are, how we look different physically and in our faces, and how tall we are, how short we are, everybody's nipples are different. Everybody's nipples are different. And I have seen babies latch onto nipples that some nurses are like, yeah, I don't know how to get a baby to latch onto that nipple, but we figure it out, and then also we have bigger nipples, and we're like, oh no, I don't think that nipple is too big for a baby to latch on. And those babies know how to latch onto those nipples. So there is no shame. Don't be ashamed. Don't feel any different because you feel like you don't have the perfect picture perfect nipples. Your baby will figure out how to latch onto it. But if not, we always have a lactation specialist who can figure it out, and they can also help to get the correct phalange. That's very important to meet your nipple size so that you are not damaging your nipples when you're pumping milk. So those are a lot of different things to consider when it comes to nipples. Nipple shields, Christina, you want to talk more about nipple shields? No. Okay. I am I'm indifferent when it comes to nipple shills. And my approach when it comes to breastfeeding is very like as natural as possible. I really want baby to latch on. I'm the one to be like, okay, yeah, let's get baby to latch on to the breast. And then try to adjust baby's latch to make sure that it's fully on there, to make sure that it's not just the actual nipple, but you're getting some of that areola in there so it's not pinching down on that nipple. And then sometimes with the nipple shills, it kind of gives that like almost like a fake teat, but I have not worked with a lot of premature babies. So I have not experienced working with a nipple shield in the NICU. But I have worked with moms whose babies had a tongue tie and they were breastfeeding their babies. And because of the tongue tie, it was causing the nipple to get very sore. So in the process of healing their nipples, they were using a nipple shield to prevent the any more damage or soreness from the nipple shield. So I feel like if you really need to know how to use it, because you want to make sure that you are not um using it long term. It's really for like a short period of time to kind of get baby either to understand how to latch onto the nipple or for your sake to be able to heal a little better. So working with a lactation specialist or peer support who has actually dealt with nipple shields would be really beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful is that do not compare your nipples to someone else's nipples. Nipples are all different. And sometimes you can have two different nipples, not on the same body, right? And yes, definitely if you've had some struggles and had some irritation or things like that, a nipple shield can be helpful in that healing process. But I think what you're hearing repeatedly is having um, a lactation person, and if you have a preemie, someone who has experience working with preemies to support your journey. And that the nipple shield is a tool, but it's not necessarily something that you would have to use permanently. There are always exceptions. You mentioned tongue tie. If babies have other cleft palate or um, challenges with the way the palate that their arch is shaped. And so we have different tools, just like we have different types of nipples when they're feeding from a bottle. Like there's the slow flow versus regular flow. Um, because sometimes babies need more time to coordinate their breathe, suck, swallow. I do want to go back to something that both Christina and I have shared. Eating is work for a baby. It's exercise. They get tired. So sometimes we'll come up with things that may make it easier for the baby until the baby gets a little stronger. Another question that's come up, have you seen the research showing that mothers who look at photos of their babies' little cute pink toes and hands and feet or create these peaceful moments, listen to soothing music, will have better experience when they're trying to feed? Can you tell us maybe, or do you recommend those types of things as a part of being a doula support person? What do you recommend? I feel like
Yes.
Earth, Wind, and Fire might be the right choice, but that could be my bias.
Well, I play classical music, but
Okay.
it's really just any soothing music that you feel is soothing. But I will say, for me personally, when I first tried to pump, I didn't have any much of anything come out. And so
Hmm.
the nurse said, she told my husband, because this is when I was still in the hospital. She told my husband to go down to the NICU and FaceTime me so that I could see the baby while I pump. And so when she said it, I immediately rolled my eyes like, what is that gonna do for me? Like it's
I
gonna make me
love the
feel even
realness.
worse. And so he went down and I he did skin to skin. I was able to see her. And so I pumped in. It sounds cliche, but that was like the first time I got like 2.5 ounces. And I just thought that I had just like won the lottery because I had been pumping for a couple of cycles. She was born at 3:50 in the morning. So I want to say this was like 2 in the afternoon. I had been, I had got those few little bitty drops that they took to her with the Q-tip. And then I didn't get nothing else. I pumped another 2 hours, nothing came. But then I pumped another 2 hours, nothing came. And so I was thinking to myself, like, yeah, yeah, I'm fixing to call my cousin to come up here and give her some milk, and but I it did work. I have read research on it, and there's plenty of research about it, but just firsthand experience, it did. Like I remember looking at her while I was pumping, and I was thinking to myself, I just want to feed you. Oh my God, I just want to feed you. And so like the it just started squirting out little by little, and I felt so much better. And so um I had preeclampsia. So for the first 24 hours, I could not
Oh.
actually go down there to see her. Somebody
Mhm.
would have had to wheel me, and I just wasn't really up for it. So for the first 24 hours, that is, but after that first time, for the next like 12 hours, that was how I pumped. My husband would go down, he would FaceTime me, I would see her, and then I would pump.
So we probably, Marie, need to have a whole other conversation of what it's like when you're trying to breastfeed after a C-section and a C-section with preeclampsia and a C-section with preeclampsia and you're still on magnesium. Because I would have told you, hey, please be kind to yourself. There are a lot of your body has to heal you first. You just had surgery. You still have high blood pressure. And if you are not well, then you can't switch into that gear of let me get my baby well. So you
Well,
and I could have had that
I had
conversation.
I had a vaginal birth, but I was still on magnesium, and my blood
Right.
pressure was really elevated. So I actually stayed on mag a little longer than what they do for most individuals. So it
Hmm.
was very hard navigating that part of trying to initiate breastfeeding and being very fatigued. So
Absolutely. And I think that's where we have to do a better job as healthcare professionals, giving you realistic expectations so you're not like beating yourself up when your body is doing exactly what your body is supposed to do. Um, I will say we are coming to the end of time, and I feel like the conversation is just getting good because we got eyes rolling, we got all the things that really happen, right? These are real experiences that you had, and thank you for sharing your experiences. Um, we we put a little bit earlier in the chat about kangaroo care and skin to skin, but it's coming back up again. So, can you talk a little bit about what skin to skin is? And I love the fact that you wanted to make sure that dad had a chance to do skin to skin as well. So maybe in the last minute, we'll talk a little bit about that and then we'll take maybe an extra minute to wrap up.
well, skin to skin, when I had my experience with being in the NICU, and I was also gestational diabetic, it was explained that skin to skin help regulates her body temp, help regulate her blood sugar, for me, and then it was also for bonding. So I was extremely ready to get down there so that I could do skin to skin, but she was still in the incubator because she was having some issues regulating her body temp. So we
Mhm.
will only do 10-minute increments. But when we went to her first doctor's appointment, when they stripped the baby down, they want to weigh him and all of that stuff. The nurse was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna put it in my shirt, in my shirt until you get finished." So it's bonding benefits, but also skin to skin with mom does help regulate their body temp and their blood sugar. And
And
skin to
it
skin with dad
increases
is
your
most
milk production.
I was
yes.
gonna say that the
Mhm.
oxytocin that flows from that bond between mom and baby when you're doing that skin to skin is the biggest like release of oxytocin, which is why, Christina, when you were able to see your husband and your baby, like that's a really big boost of oxytocin. Like, oh my goodness, there's my husband, there's my baby. I feel all lovey dovey. Let me go ahead and have this nice release of oxytocin, which helps to have the letdown for milk to come through. So, with all the other things that the benefits of the baby that skin to skin does, one of the biggest things is the release of helping to release the oxytocin from you being able to smell the hormones on the top of your baby's head and all of that. It's one big cycle. It really
Mhm.
helps. Like having baby skin to skin helps with breastfeeding. It helps them as well.
So that's the other thing. I often joke to my students. I said, if you should become a neonatologist because literally cuddling with your patients is not inappropriate. So there are signs that show that nurturing, right? That nurturing, that bonding, that holding helps your baby's brain develop. You're actually making your baby smarter when you do skin to skin with your baby because they're getting that nurturing that they need. Okay, so I'm getting the bell that I need to wrap up. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. When you look through the chat, you'll see more information about the amazing work that Jamila and Christina do as certified doulas, the importance of doing this as a village, having a doula to support your journey, why human milk is so important, what to do when you need help with human milk, and all the benefits that come with it. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for the great questions. And we have another great webinar coming up next week that will perfectly complement this one. Everything we're talking about is taking you from the hospital to home. And another important thing making that transition is how you do safe sleep at home. When you take all the monitors away and it's just you can't stay up all night staring at your baby. So, how do we do safe sleep? So, that's going to be November 20th at 7 p.m. And you can register at our website, birthingmagic.org. Jamila and Christina, thank you again. It was wonderful talking with you tonight. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.